What's going on? Are you okay?
Come on, let's get you inside. Yeah.
Breathe.
Let's go, come on.
Guys, clear this area.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Don't crowd around.
We just need a minute.
February 7th, 2021. A remote ranch in Washington state. Inside the home, the Brown family patriarch, Billy Brown, begins having a seizure. His son Bear frantically tries to call 911, but he can't get through. In desperation, he calls a production crew member who finally reaches emergency services. By the time medics arrive, the family is screaming, "Wake up! Wake up!" But it's too late. At 68 years old, Billy Brown, the man who built an empire in the Alaskan wilderness, is gone. The world mourned the loss of the Alaskan Bush People patriarch. But here's what most fans don't know. Billy's death was just one tragedy in a family that has been haunted by loss for decades. From a catastrophic plane crash that killed Billy's entire family when he was just a teenager, to a horrific act of self-immolation, to multiple suicides, car accidents, and a cancer battle that should have been fatal, the Browns have faced more tragedy than most families could survive. Today, I'm taking you through the heartbreaking true stories of 10 people connected to Alaskan Bush people who tragically passed away. Some of these deaths happened before the cameras ever started rolling. Others played out in real time while millions watched. Content 1. The tragedy that started it all. To understand the Brown family, you have to understand where Billy came from. Because long before he was teaching his kids to live off the grid in Alaska, Billy Brown was just a regular teenager growing up in Texas. The life before Alaska. Billy Brown was born on December 3, 1952 in Fort Worth, Texas. He wasn't raised in the wilderness. He grew up in what he described as an upper-middle-class family in a comfortable Texas suburb. His father, Billy Joe Brown, was the president of a limousine company. His mother, Mary Catherine Brown, was a devoted wife and mother. Billy had one sibling, a sister whose name has never been publicly revealed, but who he described as his best friend. Billy would later say, "We were close. We were a very tight family. My mom and dad were my very great friends. The only best friend I had over them was my sister." By all accounts, Billy's childhood was normal, happy, stable. He had everything a teenage boy in the 1960s could want. But in 1969, when Billy was just 16 years old, everything changed in a single day: the plane crash. Billy's sister was competing in a beauty pageant in Corpus Christi, Texas. The family decided to fly out to support her. They chartered a private plane for the trip. Billy was supposed to go with them. But at the last minute, for reasons he never fully explained, he decided to stay home. That decision saved his life. On the way to Corpus Christi, the plane encountered a severe thunderstorm. The pilot lost control. The aircraft went down. Billy Joe Brown, Mary Catherine Brown, Billy's sister, all three of them died on impact, Billy tells his family. It all changed in one day. He continued, "I got a call from my grandparents. Point blank. Well, your mom, dad, and sister died in a plane crash." Imagine that. You're 16 years old. You say goodbye to your family one morning expecting them to return that evening, and by nightfall, they're all gone. You're suddenly alone in the world, with no warning, no preparation, no chance to say goodbye. The trauma of that moment would echo through the rest of Billy's life and shape the family he would eventually build. The betrayal. After the crash, Billy's extended family convinced him to sign documents. He was told they were routine paperwork, just legal formalities. What Billy didn't realize was that he was signing emancipation papers. By doing so, he unknowingly gave up his rights to his family's entire fortune. Within weeks, the 16-year-old boy who had lost everything was also stripped of his inheritance. No family, no money, no home. Billy found himself wandering the country, doing odd jobs to survive. He worked as a plumber, a fisherman, whatever he could find. This tragedy shaped everything that came after. It's why Billy became obsessed with family, why he raised his kids off the grid, away from a world he felt had betrayed him, why he built the Wolfpack mentality that defined Alaskan Bush People. The plane crash in 1969 didn't just kill 3 people. It created the Billy Brown the world would later know. Content 2. The Hidden Heartbreak. Before Billy met Amy and started the family we know from Alaskan Bush People, there was another chapter of his life, one that most fans never knew existed: Billy's first family. At just 16 years old, fresh from losing his entire family, Billy married a 17-year-old woman named Brenda. They married on October 23, 1969, just months after the plane crash. Years later, Billy would admit he married Brenda primarily to get a minor's release from the state of Texas. Billy and Brenda had 2 daughters together. One of them was named Twila. The other daughter's name has never been publicly confirmed, though some reports suggest her name was Brandy. For 5 years, Billy tried to make it work, but the marriage was built on trauma, not love. It was a union born out of necessity and grief rather than genuine connection. And eventually it fell apart under the weight of everything Billy was carrying. When Billy and Brenda divorced, he was essentially removed from his daughters' lives. For the next 30 years, Billy had virtually no contact with Twila. Celie, the granddaughter Billy never knew. Twila grew up, got married to a man named Mike Byers, and had 2 daughters of her own. One of them was named Celie. Celie was 14 years old, full of life, with her whole future ahead of her. And then, in a tragic car accident, Celie was killed. Twila was driving the car. Her daughter and a friend were passengers. The crash was sudden and devastating. Twila survived. Her daughter did not. The loss shattered Twila. When she finally reconnected with her father Billy for an episode of Alaskan Bush People in 2016, she told him that losing Celie was the catalyst for reaching out. Billy said, "I was heartbroken when I heard about Twila losing her daughter, but even worse than that, I lost my first granddaughter." Think about that. Billy had a granddaughter who lived for 14 years, and he never knew her, never met her, only learned about her existence after she was already gone. The meeting between Billy and Twila on the show was presented as a heartwarming reunion. But behind the cameras, the relationship remained complicated. Twila would later post on social media, "Happy Father's Day to the absentee father." Celie's death is a tragedy that most Alaskan Bush People fans never even knew about. The Branson family tragedies begin. Amy Brown, Billy's second wife and the matriarch of the family we see on Alaskan Bush People, came from her own complicated family background. Amy had a brother named Renee Branson, and Renee had a daughter named Amber. Amber Branson appeared on Alaskan Bush People as Amy's niece. She was 44 years old, a mother, and someone who had struggled with mental health issues for years. On April 29, 2020, Amber did something unthinkable. In the midst of a severe mental health crisis, Amber set herself on fire. When first responders arrived, they found her with burns covering over 90% of her body. She was still conscious and told them it was a faith test and admitted it was self-inflicted. The doctors knew immediately that her injuries were not survivable. Her family made the agonizing decision to take her off life support. On May 1, 2020, Amber Branson died. Amy was devastated. She had already been through so much, including her own battle with advanced lung cancer. And now she had lost her niece in one of the most horrific ways imaginable. But the tragedies in the Branson family weren't over. Just 3 months later, on July 22, 2020, Amy's brother Renee Branson died of kidney cancer. He was 66 years old. Within the span of a few months, Amy had lost both her niece and her brother. Content 3. Death follows the Wolfpack. By February 2021, the Brown family had already endured years of hardship. Amy had survived cancer. The family had relocated from Alaska to Washington. They were trying to rebuild, to move forward. And then, the patriarch died. Billy Brown's final days. Billy Brown had been struggling with his health for years. He had seizures, respiratory problems, kidney issues. His doctors had warned him that living at high altitude wasn't good for his condition. But Billy refused to leave the mountain ranch. He wanted to live on his own terms, right up until the end. On the evening of February 7, 2021, Billy suffered a massive seizure. Bear tried to call 911, but couldn't get through. In a panic, he called a member of the production crew who was able to reach emergency services. By the time help arrived, the family was surrounding Billy, screaming at him to wake up. CPR was attempted. A medical helicopter was requested. But it was too late. Billy Brown was pronounced dead at his home. He was 68 years old. The official cause of death was listed as probable cardiac arrest, congestive heart failure, and coronary artery disease. Contributing factors included emphysema, seizures, and a lifetime of tobacco use. When Bear announced his father's death on Instagram, he wrote, "We are heartbroken to announce that our beloved patriarch Billy Brown passed away last night after suffering from a seizure. He was our best friend, a wonderful and loving dad, granddad, and husband, and he will be dearly missed." Fans around the world mourned. Billy had been the heart of Alaskan Bush People since the show began in 2014. Billy's death also led to legal complications. He had died without a will, leaving Amy to manage an estate worth approximately $412,000, with debts exceeding $27,000. The accident that shook the family. On May 20th, 2022, just over a year after Billy's death, another tragedy struck. Joshua "Bam Bam" Brown, the second oldest son, was driving his GMC truck northbound on State Route 97 in Washington. A black Chevrolet Camaro, traveling southbound, suddenly crossed the center line into Bam Bam's lane. Bam Bam swerved to avoid a head-on collision, steering his truck into a ditch. But it was too late. The two vehicles collided at their corners. Bam Bam was taken to the hospital with minor injuries. He survived. But the two women in the Camaro were not so lucky. The driver, 28-year-old Gabriela Garcia Harrison, was airlifted to Central Washington Hospital in critical condition. The passenger, 24-year-old Lorena Martinez Gonzalez, died at the scene. Washington State troopers confirmed that Bam Bam was not at fault for the crash. The other driver had lost control and crossed into oncoming traffic. But that didn't make it any easier. Bam Bam, who had always been known for his motto, "Respect the danger," had just been involved in an accident that took a young woman's life. Lorena Martinez Gonzalez was just 24 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. The most recent loss. In January 2024, the Brown family faced yet another heartbreaking loss. Donnell Branson, Amy's great-niece and the daughter of Amber Branson, was found dead at the age of 29. Donnell had been living in Mineral Wells, Texas. Born in 1994, she had grown up in the shadow of her mother's struggles with mental health. On January 26, 2024, Donnell died from what authorities suspected was suicide by gunshot. Donnell was the second generation of the Branson family to die by suicide. First her mother Amber in 2020, now her, just 4 years later. The cycle of pain, of trauma, of mental health struggles had continued. Amy, who had already lost her niece, her brother, and her husband, now had to bury her great-niece as well. The unborn child. There's one more loss that deserves to be mentioned, even though it didn't make headlines. In 2021, Bear Brown and his girlfriend Raven were going through a turbulent relationship. They had a son together, River, but their relationship was rocky. At one point during their separation, Raven suffered a miscarriage. She later revealed that the loss of their unborn child was a major factor in their split. The grief, the pain, the inability to process it together, it tore them apart for a time. They eventually reconciled and got married in January 2022. Raven later gave birth to what she called a rainbow baby, a child born after a miscarriage. But the loss of that unborn child was another tragedy in a family that had already endured so much. Content 4. The cost of survival. So here we are, 10 deaths, 10 tragedies. A family that has been through more pain than most of us can imagine. Billy Joe Brown, Mary Catherine Brown, Billy's sister, Celie, Amber Branson, Renee Branson, Billy Brown, Lorena Martinez Gonzalez, Danelle Branson, an unborn child. Some of these people were beloved members of the Brown family. Others were connected by circumstance. But all of their deaths left scars. And the question we have to ask is, why? Why has this one family been followed by so much tragedy? The cycle of trauma. When Billy lost his family at 16, it didn't just kill 3 people. It created a wound that never fully healed. That kind of loss at such a formative age shapes everything that comes after. Billy spent the rest of his life trying to build something that couldn't be taken away. He isolated his family in the wilderness, creating a self-sufficient world where they wouldn't need anyone else. He built the Wolfpack mentality, teaching his children that family was everything, and outsiders couldn't be trusted. He taught his kids to rely on no one but each other, to survive in conditions that would break most people. It was both protective and suffocating. Billy was trying to shield his children from the pain he'd experienced, from the betrayal, from the sudden catastrophic loss. But in doing so, he also passed down his trauma, his fear, his distrust of the outside world, his belief that isolation was safer than connection. The Brown children grew up in an environment that was, by design, cut off from support systems, cut off from mental health resources, cut off from the kind of community that helps people process pain in healthy ways. They learned self-reliance, but not necessarily emotional resilience. They learned survival skills, but not always how to ask for help. When you're raised to believe that the family unit is all you have, what happens when the pain comes from within that unit? When the trauma is inherited rather than external? When the very isolation that was meant to protect you becomes its own kind of prison? Matt, the eldest son, struggled with addiction and has been in and out of rehab multiple times. His battles with substance abuse suggest someone trying to numb pain that was never properly addressed. Ami's side of the family, the Bransons, experienced a devastating cycle of mental health crises and suicides spanning 2 generations. Amber, and then her daughter Danelle, both taking their own lives within 4 years of each other. And even the family's fame, the very thing that brought them wealth and recognition, added its own pressures to an already complicated situation. The reality TV factor. Let's talk about something uncomfortable: the role that Alaskan Bush People, the show itself, may have played in some of these tragedies. Reality television creates a unique kind of pressure. The cameras are always there, documenting every moment, every emotion, every crisis. There's no room for privacy, no space to process grief without an audience. When Amber Branson set herself on fire, she had been connected to a family that was under constant public scrutiny. The Brown family's struggles, their fights, their losses, everything was public knowledge. Millions of people felt entitled to comment on their lives, to judge their choices, to dissect their pain. When Danelle Branson took her own life, she was the daughter of a woman whose death had been discussed and analyzed by millions of strangers. She grew up knowing that her mother's final, desperate act was part of the public record. That kind of exposure, that kind of collective witnessing of family trauma, leaves its own scars. When Billy died, production crew members were literally at his house, and one of them had to call 911 because Bear couldn't get through. Even in death, the family couldn't escape the machinery of the show. The cameras, the crew, the production schedule, it was all still there, still demanding attention. The line between private grief and public spectacle had completely disappeared. Living your life on camera means having your grief turned into content. It means being unable to mourn privately. It means knowing that your worst moments will be watched by millions, edited for maximum emotional impact, and discussed endlessly on social media. That takes a toll on even the strongest person. I'm not saying the show caused these deaths, but it's worth asking whether the pressure, the constant exposure, and the complete loss of privacy contributed to an environment where vulnerable people couldn't get the help they desperately needed. Whether the weight of public expectation made it harder to admit weakness, to seek therapy, to step away from the cameras and focus on healing. Where they are now. Today, the Brown family is still trying to move forward. Ami, now in her 60s, is cancer-free, but has lost her husband, her brother, her niece, and her great-niece in the span of just a few years. The Brown children are adults now, many with families of their own. They're trying to honor their father's legacy while also figuring out who they are outside of the show. Alaskan Bush People officially ended after 14 seasons. The show is on indefinite hiatus, with no confirmed plans to return. But the Browns remain in the public eye. Bear posts updates on social media. Bam Bam released an audiobook version of his father's memoir. The family continues to share pieces of their lives with the world, and they continue to carry the weight of all that loss. Conclusion: 10 people, 10 tragedies, one family that somehow keeps surviving. When you watch Alaskan Bush People, it's easy to see the Browns as larger than life, tough, resilient, unbreakable. But the truth is, they're just people. People who have been through unimaginable pain. People who have lost more than any family should have to lose. Billy Brown's story began with a plane crash that killed his entire family, and in the decades that followed, tragedy never stopped following him. His granddaughter, Celie, killed in a car accident at 14. His niece, Amber, who took her own life in a horrific act of desperation. His brother-in-law, Renee, lost to cancer. His great-niece, Donnell, dead by suspected suicide at just 29. A stranger named Lorena, killed in a crash involving his son. An unborn grandchild, lost to miscarriage. And finally, Billy himself, gone at 68 after a lifetime of fighting to keep his family together. The Browns have survived. But survival comes at a cost. And that cost is measured not just in years lost, but in the toll that grief takes on those left behind, in the ways that trauma reshapes a family, in the scars that never quite heal, no matter how much time passes or how far you run. And the question we're left with is, what do we owe the people we watch on reality TV? Do we owe them privacy in their grief? Do we owe them compassion instead of judgment? Do we owe them the space to heal without turning their pain into entertainment? Because at the end of the day, these aren't characters. They're real people. And their losses are real. Billy Brown built a family in the wilderness because he wanted to protect them from the world. But the world found them anyway, and the price they've paid has been heartbreaking. So the next time you see the Brown family, whether it's on reruns of Alaskan Bush People or in updates on social media, remember what they've been through. Remember the plane crash, the car accidents, the suicides, the illnesses, the losses that never made it into the episodes. And maybe, just maybe, offer a little grace. Because this family has survived more than most of us ever will. And they're still standing. That's the real story of Alaskan Bush People.